Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. The topic for today's discussion is constitutional provisions relating to protection of environment in India. Dear students, if we look at the history of mankind in India, protection of environment, that was part of ethics of the human beings. It was attached to the religion and the philosophy of the primitive man in India. And the primitive humans in India, they used to worship the forces of nature like sun, moon, air, water. This deep reverence for the forces of nature, that was not only due to the respect or fear of the unknown, but that was because of their reverence to the forces of the nature, because they believed that these forces of nature are responsible for sustaining the life of human beings on this planet Earth. If we look at the teachings of our gurus, if we look at Guru Nanak Dev Ji's teachings, he said, earth is like a mother, air is like a father, water is like a god. Therefore, he said it is the correlation between, harmonious interaction between these three forces which is responsible for sustenance of human life on this planet Earth. Till the human beings realized their dharma of keeping the environment clean and green and making the environment fit for abode of human beings as well as for animals, there was hardly any problem. But as soon as the consumerism crept in, as soon as the greed came in, as soon as the social values started declining, and as soon as we underwent a change in our lifestyle and we went in for rapid industrialization, the problems pertaining to pollution, they started coming up. It's not that pollution is a problem only for the country, only for our country, but it's a global phenomenon. Every country is afflicted by it. Rapid industrialization, urbanization, greed and consumerism are the most important factors which are responsible for degradation of the environment. In this backdrop, we shall be discussing the constitutional provisions, how far the constitution makes provision for promotion, protection and preservation of the environment in India, and whether those provisions have been implemented in letter and spirit. The learning objectives of this discussion shall be to analyze and discuss constitutional provisions relating to protection of environment in India, to discuss and analyze objectives of the preamble and the goals set out in directive principles of state policy, to analyze the amendment made to the Constitution by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976, and also to have a look at the approach of the judiciary pertaining to environmental pollution in India. The scheme of presentation will be, after introducing the Constitution, we shall be dealing with the preamble of the Constitution, the principles and the idea of the preamble of the Constitution. Then we shall be dealing with the fundamental rights, the directive principles of state policy, and part 11 and part 12 of the Constitution, which deals with legislative competence of the union and states to make various laws. And finally, we shall be having a look at the judicial approach to the problem of environment protection in India. Dear students, if we look at the Constitution, our Constitution is a dynamic document. It is a sacred document. It lays down the provision for creating a country where welfare state is there and that state works for the welfare of the masses. It makes provisions, though not directly, but indirectly, for the protection and preservation of the environment. If we look at the constitutional provisions, up to 1976, there was no direct reference to protection and preservation of environment in India. However, the constitutional provisions were wide enough to cover the subject matter of environmental protection. If we look at the Constitution of India gives us a federal form of government. It's a federal constitution. It emphasizes in part 3 the fundamental rights of the people. In part 4, it creates directive principles of the state policy, which are fundamental in the governance of the country, which should be kept in mind while making laws by all the organs of the government. And then in part 11 and part 12, it deals with these relations between the union and states, the legislative competence of the union and states to make various laws for this country. If we look at the preamble of the Indian Constitution, which has been held to be a key to open the mind of constitutional makers, the Supreme Court of India has declared that preamble is a key to open the mind of the constitution makers. Preamble starts with "We the people of India." So it is given by the people to themselves. It declares India to be a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. Now the use of word socialist, though the word socialist was not there in the preamble originally, this word was inserted by 42nd Amendment Act. But it does not mean that prior to 1976, India was not a socialist state, or that India was not following the socialistic pattern of governance. If we look at part 4, which talks about the directive principles of state policy, which are fundamental in the governance of the country, which the state, all the organs of the state shall keep in mind while making laws, that very clearly articulates a socialistic pattern of governance in this country. So therefore, even prior to the insertion of a specific word socialism or socialist in the preamble of the Indian Constitution, provisions were wide enough in part 4 which established or which aimed at establishing a socialist pattern of governance. And when we talk about socialistic pattern of governance, can we envisage a country which says it's a welfare state, which says that it's having a socialistic pattern of governance, and then it allows rich and influential people to pollute the environment, to go in for rapid industrialization, to go in for rampant industrialization without paying heed to the environment, to pollute the environment, to pollute the water resources and the water bodies, and then say that we are a welfare state or we are following the socialistic pattern of governance. Therefore, it is very clear that the socialistic pattern of governance itself contemplates that the resources shall be equitably distributed and that there shall be respect for the resources. Environmental resources have also to be paid respect and has also to be kept clean. Therefore, the preamble objectives, though not directly but indirectly, aimed at having a system of governance where the environment is respected, preserved and protected. As we said, when we contemplated socialistic pattern of government, can we say that if no check is made on the rich and influential people and they are allowed to pollute the environment, they are allowed to exploit the resources without caring for the environment and the lives and health of the masses, we cannot say that we are a socialist state or we are having a socialistic pattern of governance being a welfare state. Therefore, the preamble itself, not only this, if you see the preamble, it is also using the terms social, economic and political justice. Now when we say social, economic and political justice, can we say that a country can have a social justice where the rich and influential are polluting and the poor is paying the price? That country cannot have a social justice. Therefore, to promote social justice, not only social justice but economic justice, it is required and it was needed to have environmental protection to preserve and protect the environment. Therefore, the preamble objectives very clearly specify, if not directly but indirectly, for the preservation and protection of the environment in India. When we look at part 4, that is the directive principles of state policy, which we said that the Constitution declares are fundamental in the governance of the country, and each organ of the state should keep in mind these economic aims of the Constitution, which are set out in part 4 while making laws. Even in directive principles, up to 1976, there was no specific provision which dealt with environment protection. But then that does not mean that the provisions were insufficient. If we look at Article 38, which talked about welfare state, which talked about welfare of the masses. So when we look at Article 38, which talks about welfare of masses, as I said, welfare of masses is not possible if they are compelled to stay in a stinky environment, if they are compelled to stay in an unclean environment, if the state does not provide them clean air, clean water and clean environment. If you look at Article 47, which talks about improvement of public health. Now, do you think that the improvement of public health is possible in an environment which is full of dirt, dust, filth? It is not possible. And where the air is not clear, air is not clean, where the people suffocate due to smog and smoke, where the people suffocate due to the smog created by the vehicular emissions or by the industrialization or by fossil fuel burning or maybe by crop residue burning. It is not possible to make provisions for the improvement of public health unless these things are curtailed. Therefore, there was a clear mandate in Article 47 of the Constitution, which provided the state shall endeavor for the improvement of public health and sanitation. Now, if we look at these provisions along with Article 51 of the Directive Principles of State Policy. Now, Article 51 of State Policy, Directive Principles of State Policy, that calls upon the promotion of internal peace and security. Not only this, but it also desires respect for international laws and treaties which are aimed at environment protection. Now, if you see, Article 51 says to develop a respect for international laws and treaties, not only international laws and treaties, but also in particular, if we look at, when we talk about international laws and treaties, there are many international treaties pertaining to environment protection. Therefore, directly, Article 51 called upon the government, called upon the state to promote respect for the international laws and treaties, and therefore, as we discussed in previous modules, that we have Vienna Convention to which India is signatory, we have Montreal Protocol to which India has ratified. Therefore, under Article 51, the state is mandated to create respect for these international laws, including environmental laws. 42nd Amendment of 1976. It inserted Article 48A in the Constitution of India. Now, this Article 48A says, state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forests and wildlife of the country. This 42nd Amendment came after the country made its commitments to the preservation of environment in the UN conference held in Stockholm in 1972. And thereafter we inserted this Article 48A in the Constitution, which directly deals with that the state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment. Therefore, it casted an obligation upon the union or upon the states that they are to work for the protection and improvement of the environment. So, specific provisions were inserted by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. It must be remembered here that Directive Principles of State Policy are contained in Part 4 of the Constitution of India. And these are non-justiciable, meaning that you cannot file a suit or you cannot approach the court for the enforcement of these provisions. However, it does not mean that the court cannot declare. If we look at the provisions contained in the Directive Principles, they are said to be fundamental in the governance of the country, and nowhere there is a bar on the power of the court to declare a law as unconstitutional which does not conform to the Directive Principles. Rather, the Supreme Court of India has said that when there is a law is enacted and two interpretations are possible, one which is in favor of or which is in conformity with the Directive Principles of State Policy, that should be adopted, and therefore the Directive Principle should be implemented. Not only this, the powerful pronouncement of the Supreme Court in Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India in 1978 that set the tone, that expanded the horizons of various fundamental rights, in particular Article 21. And when Article 21 is interpreted in the light of Directive Principles, various new rights have come to be incorporated in the bundle of rights available under Article 21. We shall refer to it little later. Let us see the fundamental duties, that is part 4A, which was inserted by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. In this, Article 51A clause G was inserted, which puts a duty to protect and improve natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. Therefore, out of these 11 fundamental duties which are cast upon the citizens of India, 51AG clearly cast a duty on all the citizens to protect and improve natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. So that, as we said, that 42nd Amendment of 1976 put clear provisions in the Constitution pertaining to protection and promotion of the environment. But then the question arises whether these fundamental duties are enforceable, because the mode of enforcement of duties is not expressly provided in the Constitution. For that purpose, we will have to look at the decision of the Rajasthan High Court in L.K. Kulwar versus State of Rajasthan. In this decision, the Rajasthan High Court clarified the correlation between rights and duties. Rajasthan High Court said that rights and duties can only coexist. There can be no right without a duty, and there can be no duty without a right. So if there cannot be any right without a duty, and these two coexist only, therefore there is a duty upon every citizen, and that duty is enforceable as a corresponding right of another citizen. And another point, another objection which was always raised, when the courts tried to take cognizance of the matters, the objection was raised that this is a policy matter. In Shri Sachidanand Pandey versus State of West Bengal, where the West Bengal government leased out certain land to have a 5-star hotel. Now when the land was leased out of which 4-acre land from the zoo was also leased out by the state government. And the state government leased out that land in public interest. They said public interest in development is also there. And when this matter was challenged in the court, it was contended that it is a matter of policy. Which land is to be used for what purpose? That is the prerogative of the state, and the courts should not be intervening therein. But the Supreme Court of India in Sachidanand Pandey versus State of West Bengal held that court cannot shrug its shoulders on the ground that it is a matter of policy and therefore it is for the state to decide. Court said whenever we find that the environment is at stake, the court can issue necessary directions in the matter. It can issue orders in the matter wherever it is needed, and just because it is a matter of policy or it's a matter of priority for the state, we cannot shrug our shoulders from the constitutional duty which is cast upon us. Now let us move to part 3 of the Constitution, that is the fundamental rights. Part 3 contains various fundamental rights. In particular, when we look at Article 21, now Article 21 says, no person shall be deprived of his life or liberty except according to procedure established by law. So that means every person, whether he is a citizen or a non-citizen, he has got a right to life and liberty. And it cannot be taken except according to procedure established by law. Now what is meant by right to life? If we look at the decision of the American courts in Munn versus Illinois, where field justice said that life does not mean mere animal existence. It is much more than that. Taking a leaf from the observations of field justice in Munn versus Illinois, the Supreme Court of India in Francis Corelli versus Union Territory of Delhi said, life does not mean mere animal existence. It is much more than that. It includes within itself all those faculties through which, all those limbs through which life is enjoyed. And if we say if it includes within itself all those faculties and all those limbs through which life is enjoyed, it would include within itself a right to live with human dignity. And the right to live with human dignity cannot be enforced unless we grant people a right to live in clean and unpolluted environment. However, let us see what the Supreme Court said in Maneka Gandhi. Now, Maneka Gandhi case is a watershed so far as fundamental rights jurisprudence in this country is concerned. In Maneka Gandhi, the Supreme Court said Article 21, when it says no person shall be deprived of his life or liberty except according to procedure established by law, it said whether that procedure can be any procedure or whether that procedure has to conform to some norms. And the court declared any procedure which is not fair or just or reasonable. The procedure has to be fair, just and reasonable. To deprive a person of his liberty or of his life, the procedure provided by law must be just, fair and reasonable. This interpretation of the Supreme Court opened new vistas for interpretation of Article 21. And with the passage of time, Article 21 became an umbrella article. It is now not a single right, it is a bundle of rights. So much so that it has become one of the most important provisions in the Constitution. Became a bundle of rights, and many new rights have come to be included under this expensive interpretation of Article 21, made possible by the decision of the Supreme Court in Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India. If we look at the present case scenario, right to live in clean environment, healthy environment and pollution-free environment has been declared to be part of a right to life and personal liberty, which is guaranteed in Article 21 of the Constitution to every person, citizen or non-citizen. So what happened is, after the decision of the Maneka Gandhi, many of the directive principles of state policy, which were hitherto held to be non-justiciable, have come to be raised to the status of fundamental right in conjunction with Article 21. So right to a life and liberty enshrined in Article 21 has become, as we said, a bundle of rights. Let us move to the next portion of our presentation. Part 11 of the Constitution talks about the legislative powers of the Union and states. That means it talks about on which subjects the Union can make law, on which subjects the states can make law. Article 246 of the Constitution of India provides triple enumeration. It provides for 7 schedules wherein there are 3 lists. List 1 is the Union list. It contains those subjects on which Union can make laws. List 2 of the 7 schedule contains those subjects on which states alone can make law. And the third list, that is the concurrent list, contains those subjects on which Union and states can make laws, and if there is any repugnancy, any inconsistency between the Union and the state law, the Union law shall prevail, subject to certain other exceptions which we will discuss later. Now if we look at the list 1, there are subjects like UNO, entering into treaties with foreign countries, subjects relating to regulation of industry, mines, ports, etc. Those industries, mines, ports, etc., which have pan-India or interstate base. If we look at list 2, it has subjects like public health, sanitation, agriculture and industry. The subjects in both the lists, they were wide enough to include laws or to make laws pertaining to the environment. This apart, there is Article 248, which deals with the residuary powers of the Union, read with entry 97 of list 1. These provisions confer upon the Union government, Union Parliament, exclusive competence to make laws on the subjects which are not enumerated in either of these lists. So therefore, even if there was no specific provision, Article 248 read with Article entry 97 of list 1 were wide enough to cover enactment of any law by the Union pertaining to environment protection. Not only this, right from the beginning, we have provision in the form of Article 253 in Part 11 of the Constitution of India. This provision empowers the Union to legislate for giving effect to any treaty or any agreement with another country and for implementing decisions made at international conferences. Now, as we discussed earlier, India is a party to various international treaties and protocols and conventions, including treaties pertaining to environment. Therefore, under Article 253, Union had the legislative competence, had the power that it could enact law pertaining to preservation and protection of environment in India. This apart, if we look at entries 13 and 14 of the Union list, Union had specific power to make laws to meet the international obligations or to meet the obligations under the international conventions. 42nd Amendment added two entries in the concurrent list, that is entry 17A and 17B, pertaining to environment itself. These entries were put in the concurrent list that both the state and the union both were competent to legislate on them. 17A and 17B, they deal with forests and protection of wildlife, wild animals, birds, etc. So if we look at the plethora of the constitutional provisions, it can be very safely said that the Constitution contains elaborate provisions relating to protection and promotion of environment, clean environment. But then, as we said, there are sufficient and adequate provisions in the Constitution. Let us have a look at what the judiciary, how the judiciary has contributed to the protection of environment. If we look at the judicial decisions, we will find that Indian judiciary has played a very proactive role in the preservation and protection of environment. The instrument of public interest litigation has helped the Supreme Court to develop environmental jurisprudence in India. The Supreme Court has taken leaf from international law and principles, developed various environmental jurisprudence principles like polluter pays principle. That means the person who is responsible for the pollution should not only compensate for the damage caused by him, but he also should pay for restoration of the ecology, for restoration of the environment. The courts have incorporated, declared various principles like public trust doctrine, like precautionary principle. These principles have been brought into Indian environmental jurisprudence by judicial pronouncements. Not only that, the judiciary declared that a right to life includes a right to live in a clean and healthy environment, and it is a right against environmental pollution, but it has also delivered landmark judgments. For example, if we look at B.R. Vadhera versus Union of India, in this case, a complaint was made to the Supreme Court that the authority responsible for pollution control, they are not able to provide clean environment to the residents of Delhi. The court not only declared a right to clean environment as part of Article 21, but it also held that it also issued directions to this New Delhi Municipal Corporation to ensure collection and disposal of garbage to keep the city clean. It also discussed various environmental jurisprudence principles like precautionary principle and polluter pays principle. If we look at the decision of the Supreme Court in Rural Litigation and Entitlement Kendra versus State of UP, now this case brought to light large scale quarries, limestone quarries. Mining was conducted of limestone at rampant scale without paying any heed to the disturbance caused to the ecology and the pollution of the environment. In that, the mining was carried out in Dehradun, Mussoorie area, which was actually disturbing the ecological balance. The petition was filed in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court ordered closure of limestone quarries. Though the court ordered closure of limestone quarries, but it also realized that it is going to cause financial hardships to those who have invested large amounts of money in mining, those who have developed that infrastructure. But the court said it is the minimum price that we have to pay to protect the environment and to safeguard the lives of people and to safeguard the right of people to live in healthy and clean environment. Having said that, Supreme Court ordered the closure of limestone quarries in Doon, Mussoorie area. If we look at Subhash Kumar versus State of Bihar, there the Supreme Court held that a right to live is a fundamental right under Article 21, and it includes the right to enjoy pollution-free water and air. So there the court clearly articulated the right to clean air and right to clean water. And the court said if anything endangers or impairs the quality of life, in derogation of the laws, a citizen has a right to seek a removal of pollution from water. That means citizen has a fundamental right that he can approach the higher judiciary, the High Court or the Supreme Court, and seek a direction to the appropriate government for removal of pollution. The Royal Citizens Welfare Forum versus Union of India is another landmark case where the court discussed various principles concerning environmental jurisprudence. Now in this case, untreated effluents, they were discharged by tanneries and they were polluting water supplies and water table, and they were making the water unfit for use. The court came down heavily, and court concluded that right against environment pollution is reiterated that it is implicit in right to life and it is part of the fundamental right to life under Article 21. And the court came down heavily, saying that those industries which are not complying with the directions of the Pollution Control Board, they shall be closed down unless they show compliance with the environmental laws. They shall be closed down, though it may cause, as we said, financial hardship, but the court came down very heavily on these things. If you see MC Mehta versus Union of India, in this case, degradation caused to the Taj Mahal, that was the issue. The degradation of the quality of Taj Mahal was caused due to the environment pollution caused by coal using industries. The court issued directions in this matter to 292 industries which are located in Agra to either switch to natural gas or stop functioning. The court ordered them either you stop functioning using coal or and shift over, or you shift over to CNG. Similarly, if you look at MC Mehta versus Kamal Nath, there the question was as to the disturbance to ecological balance caused by pollution. The court said that disturbance of the basic environment elements with air, water, soil, which are necessities of life, would be hazardous to life within the meaning of Article 21 of the Constitution. And the court said, under such circumstances, we shall be applying the polluter pays principle, and we shall order those industries, those persons who are polluting the environment, not only to pay for the damage caused by them, but also to pay for the restoration of the ecological balance and for improving the quality of air. If we look at Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai versus Kohinoor CTNL Infrastructure Private Limited, where the court reiterated that right to clean and healthy environment is part of common law jurisprudence and is also part of Article 21 of Constitution of India. If we look at another decision of the Supreme Court in MC Mehta versus Union of India, the court said it is the duty of the state to ensure pollution-free environment. The court said there is a need to safeguard the countrymen from the vices of air pollution. Overawed by the environmental air pollution in Delhi, Supreme Court refused to provide extension of deadline for conversion of vehicles from CNG. The court said we cannot extend the deadline for conversion of vehicles to CNG because the air pollution has reached alarming proportions. So therefore, students, if we look at the constitutional provisions, we find that there are sufficient constitutional provisions dealing with environmental protection. Not only the provisions are, or the goals can be seen from the preamble, from the directive principles, but also if you look at the fundamental duties, and in particular if you look at the 42nd Amendment of 1976, which has incorporated entries pertaining to pollution in the Constitution, we also saw that the judiciary in India, it has developed environmental jurisprudence and has played a very proactive role. A right to live in clean environment, pollution-free environment, has been declared to be a fundamental right as part of Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Thank you.